Occasionally you'll hear in a discussion of a panel or some group that's discussing some issue, and they're trying to sort out the difficulties of maybe a new policy or some sort of a law or some sort of an idea. And they'll work through it, and sometimes you'll hear there'll be an exchange of ideas and facts and thoughts on the subject, and then someone will say, well, that just isn't people's lived experience. And this is a new term, lived experience, that's gaining ground. And you'll hear it in a number of settings, but it's quite often we want to meet people where their lived experience is, or whatever. And so this phrase has been used a lot, and it's just interesting. In this age where words change meaning all the time, and there's all kinds of labels and phrases that are being invented, it seems almost daily. It's always good to stop and examine a phrase and figure out what does it mean. You think about the term lived experience. What's the difference between lived experience and experience? Just think about it. Like, how would you differentiate between those two things? Is there any such thing as a non-lived experience? It seems funny that we would put those two words together as if somehow experience would be anything other than lived. Of course it is. We only experience the things we live through, and so it's an odd phrase. And so the words themselves, as is often the case in our day and age, they are not actually describing the idea. They're just the label that's placed on the idea. What's behind the words is a greater idea of somehow the facts don't apply because this person is experiencing something, and that's what matters. And so they use the phrase lived experience, and usually in the context of a discussion about something where the facts are being put around and people are giving data, and then someone says, this isn't the lived experience of so many people, or whatever. And so it's very frequently used as a counter to the set of evidence that's being brought. What I think it is in all of this is it's a way for people to once again come back to this idea that my perspective and my ideas and my experience are evidence, that they are to be held in authority, that what I'm experiencing, what I say I'm experiencing must be held as true. You have to believe what I'm saying. It's my lived experience. And who are you? You didn't live my experience. And so that seems to me to be the way it's quite well mostly used. And that's a bit concerning once again as we see this slide in our society away from the principles of truth to the idea that we should enhance a person's personal experience to the point of being an authority. But if you think about it in life, our experiences are usually very difficult to interpret. We experience things that we don't always understand ourselves. Why is this happening? How often have you asked the question, oh, why is this happening to me? Right? You don't know. I mean, it's interesting when we try to say that my lived experience should be somehow treated as authoritative, but I often just can't understand the reasons or even what happened. Think about a car accident and the number of witnesses that could be there and how many different perspectives there are on that car accident, and often finding out exactly what happened can be very difficult. Even if there's a video and we all watch the video together, sometimes it's hard to know what actually happened in that video. And people will focus on different things, and our individual lived experience will actually vary quite a bit from one another. And so it's a thing that we got to be careful about in putting too much emphasis on the lived experience of somebody. Truth is what it is, in spite of lived experience or lived perception of experience. And we got to be careful that we always come back to the truth. This is why the scriptures tell us so frequently in Deuteronomy and then beyond. It's repeated in the New Testament that anything should be examined and on the witness of two or three. That we shouldn't just hear one person's perspective, but we should actually have multiple witnesses to determine a matter, because our individual perspectives can be biased or incorrect, or we could just be confused. In 1 Thessalonians 5:21, it says that examine everything, and then there's a word that I'll skip for the moment, but it says that examine everything, hold fast to that which is good, abstain from every form of evil. But the New American Standard puts the word carefully right there. Now, if you read another translation, it doesn't put the word there. It's one of the few places where the New American Standard adds a word that wasn't in the original context, in the original wording. It says, examine everything, and they say carefully, because that original Greek word for examination, it implies this idea of testing things. like delve into it, examine it, and so naturally carefully or extensively. Like, don't just take things at face value. Look into them. And this scriptures are very good. It's in the particular context in Thessalonians, he's talking about prophecy and such, but it's a good principle right across the board that when we look at things in life, we need to examine them carefully. We need to look at the facts. We need to look at data. And yes, we need to look at the experience of individuals and see what their perspective is and bring it all into bear and look at it all. But I see an alarming trend now to move to the idea of narrative over facts. And so you will see in our society a growing interest in using narrative to decide what really is true, or lived experience to decide what we should do. There is actually a group of lawyers in the States that has been actively working to change the legal system away from merely looking at facts and instead looking at the stories of the people involved and using that to determine what the law, what the outcome of a case should be. And it's just a bit dangerous to say we're going to move away from facts and instead we're just going to look at the stories of people. Another famous case, you may have observed it at the time, happened a few years ago, but one reporter was caught in their story telling something that wasn't accurate, and they admitted. They said, no, actually, you're right, this reporting wasn't accurate, but it was the right narrative. And this was their excuse. It's the right narrative. Wait a minute. We're looking for facts in a news article, not a narrative, are we? Well, maybe we are. The world is switched, it seems, from facts to the story we want to tell. And while that may sound romantic, it doesn't bode well if we live life that way. It's certainly not biblical. The Bible warns us about holding to the truth, and that we don't just simply tell the story we want. We don't just simply listen to the things that make for a good conclusion or a climax or make us feel better. And our lived experience is more what we want it to be instead of what it really is. And so got to be a little careful when we come to these ideas and not abandon the reason and the logic and the sensibility of wisdom in facts and an examination, and not merely embracing a new set of biases. Something to think about.